And if you want to call the jury, come up. That's fine. In order. Okay, so you ready? Okay, during Mr. Moran's cross of Agent Rustin, I did not omit 1047, 1048, 1067, 1085, 1086, 1087, 1090, and 1091 and 1092, because Mr. Moran didn't talk about them, although I think it was assumed that I had introduced those, and I'm certainly willing to introduce those exhibits if you want me to, Mr. Moran. There are some of them that weren't discussed today. Well, if they're admitted, it really doesn't matter, does it? I mean, I'm just trying to, instead of taking the time for the jury's coming. Okay. You okay with that?
I'm fine with admitting them. We are admitting all of them.
Yes.
Would the court read the numbers one more time?
Sure. No, that's fine. 1047, 1048, 1067, 1085, 1086 and 87, 1090, 91, and 92. And oil, they're there, so you can have them in. And I'll take care of it right now. Okay, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we can be seated. Your next witness?
People call to the stand Jed Botsford.
All right. And Mr. Botsford, if you would raise your right hand, please, before you sit down. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, I do. Thank you. Have a seat.
Good morning, Mr. Botsford.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Very good, thanks.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury, please?
My name is Jed Botsford. I work with the U.S. Forest Service.
Okay, and for the record, how do you spell your last name?
Botsford.
All right. You said you work for the Forest Service. What type of work do you do for them?
I'm the Recreation Program Manager for the Columbine Ranger District on the San Juan National Forest.
And where is the San Juan National Forest generally?
Wolf Creek, the summit of Wolf Creek to Utah and the New Mexico border to Red Mountain Pass, roughly. That's the San Juan. The Columbine Ranger District is Red Mountain Pass to New Mexico, Lados to the Piedra.
Okay. Does that area include Middle Mountain?
It does.
And the Vallecito Lake Basin?
Yes.
How long have you been with the Forest Service?
Let's see, 2012, so 9 years.
Okay. And you said you're the Recreation Program Manager?
Yes.
What does that entail?
So all programs that are managed under recreation, so outfitter and guides, wilderness, trails, visitor information services. If somebody is doing something in one of those aspects, then I will be their supervisor.
Okay. Do you have oversight regarding the Middle Mountain area and the recreation programs there?
Yes, I do.
What does that specifically entail?
So in the Middle Mountain area, we have snowmobiling, we have OHV, ATV, UTV, overground travel, and lots of hunting, outfitter and guides, travel management as a broad spectrum.
Fair to say you're knowledgeable about the Middle Mountain area.
Yes,
And do you know the sort of on-the-ground topography of Middle Mountain?
yes,
Have you viewed a topographical map of Middle Mountain in preparation for your testimony in this case?
yes, I have.
If I showed you that map, would you recognize it?
Yes,
May I approach with Exhibit 219?
Yes.
Do you recognize that, sir?
yes, I do.
Is that map an accurate depiction of the topography of Middle Mountain and the Vallecito area?
Yes,
Are there some markings on that map as well?
yes, there is.
You see a red line that's sort of snaking through the map.
Yes,
What does that represent?
that would represent Middle Mountain Road.
There's a red arrow. What does that arrow represent?
That would be the gate at Bear Eye Park.
And a purple line as well. What does that represent?
Those purple lines represent the OHV trails that are opened up 50-inch vehicles or less.
Okay, when you say an OHV vehicle, what does that mean?
ATV or a UTV that is 50 inches or less.
And what are those terms, those letters, what do those stand for?
Sorry, off-highway vehicle, all-terrain vehicle.
Okay. And can you describe what one of those might look like for those that don't know?
An ATV, all-terrain vehicle, would be 4 wheels typically. Used to be 3 wheels, 1 in front, 2 in the back. Now, single occupancy vehicle that has knobby tires and can climb up steep slopes. Okay. UTV would be typically a 2-passenger vehicle, like a miniature Jeep.
Okay, great. Back to the map, are all those lines and drawings and representations accurate to the area that you know?
Yes.
Move to admit People's Exhibit number 219.
Mr. Moran, or Bogan, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, I should know you by now, huh?
No objection.
Thank you. It's admitted.
Move to publish to the jury. Yes. Exhibit 219. Mr. Botsford, we're putting the map up on the screen behind you. Is that the same map that you have there in front of you?
Yes, it is.
All right. I've got a pointer that's on the counter there in front of you. If you wouldn't mind extending that pointer, stepping down from the podium and using that microphone right behind you, and approaching the screen, please.
Okay.
And you can go ahead and take that microphone out of the stand if it's easier. If you could just scroll down a little bit lower. Can you show us where the start of Middle Mountain Road begins?
It would start right here.
And you're pointing to the bottom center of the map, is that right?
Correct. This would be County Road 501, and this would be the start of the dirt part of the road.
Okay. And
Middle Mountain.
and how would you describe Middle Mountain Road itself?
The first half mile is County Road that is dirt, and just after, I can't see the beginning of the Forest Service land, but after the cattle guard, it's National Forest, all the way to the top, gravel surface. Forest Service would call it grade 3.
Okay. And there at the top of the map, we see that red arrow you described. Can you
Correct.
point that out to us, please? And what does that represent?
That represents a gate that is closed for travel management purposes on November 30th of every year, and does not open again until June 1st.
Okay.
So that prohibits wheeled vehicles during those closure dates of the winter.
Great. And as long as we're talking about the gate, let's just delve a tiny bit deeper into that. Does the gate reopen again in the winter?
Yes, it does. So the Middle Mountain Road is groomed by the San Juan Sledders, which is a volunteer snowmobile club in the area. And so when the snow depths reach 12 inches or greater, the San Juan Sledders can open the gate and groom the road for snowmobile traffic or any tracked winter
And does that stay open then after 12 inches of snow accumulated and they've groomed it? Does it stay open all winter?
It'll stay open until the snow depth, until the club will no longer be able to groom the snow. Or until the snow depth is too small or it does not support snow catting.
Okay, and then it closes again.
And then either the club or the Forest Service would go up on snowmobiles and close the gate.
And then when does it reopen again in the spring?
June 1st.
Okay. Roughly when, during those winter months, roughly when does it close again?
It really depends on the year, snowpack, warm temperatures, but I would say roughly the end of March, first week of April.
Okay.
Snowpack is built out now.
Okay. There's also a purple line, several purple lines on this map. Can you describe those for us?
Yeah, those purple lines here represent the OHV trails that are accessed down here just below Barry Park.
Okay, let me stop you there. You pointed at a point on the map near a hairpin turn and described it as Barry Park. What is that?
Barry Park is basically Big Meadows area on Middle Mountain that are popular for camping, and they're devoid of trees.
Okay, so is it more of a flatter area? People might want to camp and bring their campers up there?
Correct.
Okay. Barry Park, and point that out for us again, please.
It would be, well, this switch back here, you can switch back up, and then open area in here, and a little bit of an open area right here.
Okay. Just to take a step back, how far is it from the start of Middle Mountain Road to where the gate is, roughly?
You got me there.
Okay. But like,
I would say 4+ miles.
okay, more than 4 miles. And the ATV trail you described starting there at Barry Park, where does it intersect again with Middle Mountain Road?
Right here at this hairpin turn.
Okay, and that hairpin turn, is it fair to say that you can actually bypass the gate by going on the ATV trail?
Correct.
Okay. Does that ATV trail close during the winter?
It does.
Like, there's a physical obstacle, or it's just there's so much snow it's not usable?
There's a physical obstacle currently.
Currently. Do you know if there was one in 2012?
Not without checking the date of when we installed it.
Okay. For those that have never used a topographical map of this kind, can you describe very briefly how we're to interpret the very thin black lines that are all over that map?
Yes. So you have, can I sit down?
You may.
Okay. So if you think about a topographical map being a flattened version of the mountains. So I'm going to show you my hand, and you can see my knuckles. If you picture these as being the mountains, and the valleys would be in between my knuckles, and then the rest of the hand is slopes. So if you draw rings around the top of each one of these in increments, like you see on the map, and then you flatten it out, you get the back of the hand. So the lines represent foot contour intervals. So on here, I can't tell exactly what it is, but they usually go in 20 feet increments. So the broader, the farther space between the lines, the flatter the terrain. The closer the rings are, or the lines are together, the steeper the terrain.
May I approach the screen, Your Honor? Yes. So the area you described as Bear Eye Park, right around here, we see fewer lines.
Correct.
What does that mean?
That means it's flatter because it takes a longer amount of time to gain the elevation between each ring.
And this area here, at the top of the valley of Vallecito Creek, those lines are very close together. What does that mean?
Which means it's very steep.
Is
And
that true in this area as well, on the other side of Vallecito Creek?
yes.
Can you describe the winter conditions on Middle Mountain? Does it get a lot of snow?
Middle Mountain gets a good amount of snow. There's a great amount of snowmobiling up there from the very beginning of the road all the way to the top of the mountain.
And when the snow fills in and the San Juan sledders are allowed to reopen the gate, what does the grooming on the roadway look like?
Smooth, hard surface with lines that go down from the grooming operation. So on the back of the cat, there's essentially a rubber mat that puts grooms in the snowpack.
And do they groom the entire width of the roadway?
Correct.
Okay. Is that possible to drive a car up there in the winter?
It depends on when it was groomed last and the night temperatures before. But yes, 3 years ago, we had a gentleman who drove a small bus quite a ways up to just below the gravel pit on Middle Mountain.
Okay. At the risk of asking you to stand up again, can you show us where the gravel pit is on Middle Mountain, please? Middle Mountain Road?
Gravel pit would be located.
Thank you. So you can drive a car, and fair to say, then you could also drive an ATV up there in the winter as well?
Very much so. Once the snowpack warms up, that bus sunk into the snow and was stuck for days. So same thing with ATVs.
So you said that there's a lot of ATV usage up on this mountain,
Correct.
and the area is well known to locals as well?
Yes, it is.
No further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Botsford, you testified on direct that you're the Recreation Program Manager for the Columbine unit, correct?
Yes.
And I'd ask the court permission to move between here and the map and all that good stuff, please. And I'd ask that 219 remain published, please. Permission to move about the court?
Yes.
And what we see on people's 219, we got Middle Mountain Road on viewers' right in the red, correct?
Correct.
And on viewers' left, the red road, what road is that?
That would be County Road 500 that leads from the junction of 501 to, it basically dead ends at the Vallecito campground.
And that, when you say it dead ends by Vallecito campground, we even got Vallecito campground on the map, correct?
That is correct.
And you've already shown that the jury wants, but I want to do it again. Where the map is, or where the gate is, correct?
That is correct.
That's denoted kind of like by that arrowhead, right?
Yes.
And what we can also see on this map is Runlet Park on the far right, correct?
Yes.
And there's also some streams we can see on this map as well, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And one of those, I believe, and I'm going to mispronounce it, because it sounds like I've been mispronouncing it for years. So I want to call it Berry Park.
Bear Eye?
Bear Eye Park. South Berry Creek, correct? That's on this map?
Well, Bear Creek.
Okay.
Yeah. Bear
That's
Creek.
actually South Bear Creek.
Correct.
And that runs from viewers left to right quite a ways up towards where this map shows the red line ends, correct?
Yes.
And when we look at the red line on the viewer's left, a bunch of little squares, do those denote houses, habitations, that sort of thing?
Yes, it does.
And I believe you said during direct examination that this area, Middle Mountain, is popular for recreation. Is that right?
Correct.
And it's your job to oversee that and make sure that the land of many uses is being used appropriately.
Yes, it is.
And it sounds like this area is popular with off-road vehicle users, correct?
Yes, it is.
And you name the 3 kinds of vehicles. Also popular with day hikers.
Day hikers, hunters, backpackers, campers, rock climbers. A full spectrum of rock climbers.
A full spectrum. And there's some mountain biking trails up there as well, correct?
Not specifically designed just for mountain bikes, but mountain bikes do use the trails.
Are they allowed up there?
Yes. Outside of the wilderness.
Hunters, hikers, some bikers, OHV users. It sounds like there's a lot of people up there recreating. Is that correct?
Yes, during the summer and fall, I would say yes.
And you spoke on direct about the gate that's denoted by the red arrowhead on People's 219. I want to talk about that for a second.
Okay.
And if I understand correctly, that gate is closed by U.S. Forest Service from November 30th to June 1st, correct?
That is correct.
And if I understand your testimony correctly, the only folks who would have the ability to unlock that gate would be U.S. Forest Service or the San Juan sledders who have a key to it.
Correct.
And if I understand you, and aside from that, no one else is going to have a key, right?
Yes. I mean, essentially, yes. That's who should have the key, is the U.S. Forest Service and a representative from the San Juan sledders.
And it sounds like the U.S. Forest Service has an understanding or an agreement with the San Juan sledders about what conditions have to exist for them to unlock the gate and groom Middle Mountain Road.
Yes, they're under a special use authorization in order to, 1, have the key, number 2, have the authorization to groom a National Forest System road.
And I take it part of that authorization is for them to unlock that gate during the winter months when there's snow up there. If I understand you correctly, there must be at least 10 inches of snow, correct?
12 inches.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misheard. There must be at least 12 inches of snow for the special use folks to unlock that gate.
That's correct.
Okay. And as you testified, San Juan sledders, they're seeking to groom Middle Mountain Road so people can ride snowmobiles up there.
Yes.
And I think you referred to those, I guess some people call them snowmobiles, some people call them snow machines. I think you called them tracked vehicles. Or what did you call them?
So we refer to them as snowmobiles, but when the Forest Service talks about over snow travel management, there are tracked vehicles other than snowmobiles. So such as an ATV, you can put a track on an ATV.
Okay.
A set of tracks. You can also buy tracks for UTVs these days.
Meaning an owner of an ATV or a UTV could take off the knobby wheels and put on tracks, which look kind of like skis.
They would look much like a snowmobile track that goes around.
Oh, okay.
So there'd be 3 pivot points. The track goes all the way around all 3 and travels
Okay.
down.
So an owner of an ATV or UTV could take off the wheels and put on a track that looks kind of like what we see on a tank when we watch Saving Private Ryan, something like
Correct.
that. And
Except it would be rubber and not metal.
so primarily, if there's going to be travel on Middle Mountain Road during winter, it's going to be by means of snowshoes, cross-country skis, or tracked vehicles, correct?
That's correct.
And it sounds like the last time someone tried to drive a car up there, a wheeled vehicle up Middle Mountain Road during the winter months, that's an event that sticks out in your mind.
Yeah, it's not often you see a miniature bus, school bus, up, 5+ miles up the road.
And is that the last time you remember a vehicle going up there when there was those kind of conditions?
No, that's just an oddity. We have regular Joe Schmo in his vehicle, in a truck or a small SUV that try to drive on the groom all the time.
Right. When you say try to drive on the groom, it sounds like sometimes people in cars are successful in driving on the snow up on Middle Mountain Road, and sometimes they get stuck.
Correct. Once again, if the snowpack is cold enough and frozen and it's a cold enough night, they could drive up and drive out before. But if they try to drive up, let's say at 6 in the morning and turn around at 10, the snowpack is too warm at that point and they sink in. The key is the frozen temperatures.
So if someone wants to drive a car up Middle Mountain Road when there's snow up there, it's going to depend on the snowpack and the temperature and probably the kind of car they have as well.
Right.
And,
correct.
And anyone who drives up there during the winter is going to be taking that risk of getting stuck up there and having U.S. Forest Service or Sheriff Search and Rescue have to come get them if the snow is too soft to get out, correct?
Forest Service will not do search and rescue, but if they called search and rescue, they would go.
Right.
The county. And then, of course, it's on their responsibility to have it towed out.
And I'm going to mispronounce it again. I want to call it Berry Park. Help me.
Bear Eye
Park. Permission to approach again, Jim.
Yes.
Actually, show us where Bear Eye Park is on People's 219.
It would be located here. There's one meadow here and another small meadow right here.
Okay. And go ahead and stay there for a second. I believe you testified on direct that Bear Eye Park is a popular place for campers, correct?
That is correct.
And can you explain to the jury why that is?
It's flat. It's a beautiful location. There's a small pond right here. There's a creek that flows through in this area.
And safe to say that in Bear Eye Park, there's a number of what I imagine you call primitive camping spots, like areas where if you were driving down the road, you'd see a fire ring and it looked like a place where people would go car camping or camping. Safe to say?
Very safe to say.
Can you estimate how many camping sites are up there?
Objection, relevance.
What's the relevance?
Goes to the amount of traffic and people who would be up there if they saw someone trying to dispose of a body, Judge.
It's not relevant for this case, I wouldn't think.
Well, the people's thesis.
Hold on. Is it likely that people would be up there at the end of November?
Hunting season ends.
And hunting season would have been over with.
Objection leading, respectfully. And I have a whole, and Judge, I'm going to ask the.
I understand your objection. I'm not seeing the relevance, and I'm going to make the objection. And I'll try not to lead next time I ask you.
The judge was just asking you about hunting season, and you've already testified this area is popular with hunters, correct?
Correct.
And generally speaking, hunting season is over by about Thanksgiving.
That's correct.
But prior to Thanksgiving, there's a third and fourth hunting seasons up there.
Yes.
And by up there, I mean on Middle Mountain, right?
Yes.
And
Unit 74.
Unit 74.
75. Sorry, 75.
And the general public can buy hunting licenses to go up there. You can get that over the counter to go to Middle Mountain.
For second and third rifle, you can buy over the counter.
So hunting season runs up until Thanksgiving, popular area with hunters. and you can buy permits over the counter to go up there, correct?
Correct.
Did you want to sit down?
Doesn't matter.
I got one more question.
All right.
Can you point to the jury again where Runlet Park is?
Roadway Park is up here.
Okay. And is that a popular area with campers?
No, it's not. Very high elevation and exposed and generally sloped.
How about hunters?
I would say at the beginning of the Runlet Park and for when they're walking and stalking, but they're not camping.
What do you mean by walking and stalking when you're referring to hunters?
When you are trying to hunt game, you have to follow it and track it down. And stalking would be once you located it and you're trying to sneak up close enough to get your shot.
No further questions.
All right. Any redirect?
Yes, thank you. And you can have a seat, Mr. Botsford. Thank you. Let's just pick up where council left off. Are you aware that hunting season generally ends around November 18th? Does that sound right?
Yes, at the end of fourth rifle.
Fourth rifle, is that the final hunting season?
Yes, it is.
So when council said it actually goes up till Thanksgiving, that's not accurate.
It depends on the season. I mean, Colorado Parks and Wildlife changes the seasons depending on the year.
If I showed you the Colorado Parks and Wildlife hunting season documentation for 2012, would that be helpful to you?
That'd be fabulous. Okay.
Is that reliable information by your understanding?
Yes. It looked like the proclamation.
The proclamation, what's that?
The proclamation is what details to hunters the regulations of hunting, season dates, and how to apply for tags.
Is that something that is generally accepted in the community as reliable information?
Yes.
I'd ask the court to take judicial notice. And what was the date on that? The hunting season for 2012, when did it end?
Fourth rifle was November 14th through the 18th.
Okay. So there's no actual hunting after November 18th. It's legal. Is that correct?
Correct. In that, for those units.
For those units.
There's private land hunts that go well into January, but they're not, they're once again private land.
Okay. And we're referring specifically to Middle Mountain.
Which is public land, correct.
Okay. So on Middle Mountain, no hunting after November 18th.
For elk and deer, yes.
Okay. And when does the hunting day come to a close?
At sunset.
Sunset. So sunset, November 18th, fourth rifle season ends on Middle Mountain, correct?
Correct.
Did you want me to take judicial notice?
Well, if there's no objection to the evidence coming in, that's fine.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. Council was exploring with you this concept that it would be difficult to drive up there, but you said people actually try it all the time. Is that right?
Yes.
And an ATV actually might even be a better vehicle than a regular car because of the knobby tires. Fair to say?
It would be a better vehicle if you deflated the tires so you can run lower pressure, which would disperse the pressure on the snow out.
And by deflating the tires, my understanding is that you would need to put tracks on it to be successful in that endeavor. Is that correct?
That's correct.
As to the gate, we talked about how the San Juan sledders use it all winter till the snow begins to deteriorate and the road will no longer support it, correct?
Yes.
And do they announce to the community when the gate is going to be closing again in the spring?
No.
How would one find out if the gate is open or closed in April of any given year?
They would have to call the Forest Service, and then I, in return, would call San Juan sledders and say, are you done grooming? And if you are, have you closed the gate?
Okay. could people just go up there and check?
Yes, Middle Mountain Road melts out at the lower elevations earlier, so they could drive a car and then walk on the snow to find out if they wanted to walk that far.
Okay. And that depends on the year, right?
Correct.
Okay. We talked about the lock on the gate. Do people ever cut that lock?
Yes, it has been cut many times.
Many times. Is that a frequent issue for you in Forest Service, making sure that that gate remains locked?
Scope, objection.
Well, I think the issue is whether or not people could get up there, but he's already answered. I think you can move on.
Okay. I have no further questions for you. Thank you.
All right, I know we have at least one question. Any more? Counsel? Okay. Yeah, no. Okay, does that exhibit 219 highlight the entirety of Middle Mountain Road, or does the red line stop short of the actual end of Middle Mountain Road?
The red line does not show the full entirety of the road. I mean, it shows, the red line is stopped short of what the public can drive on any given day when the road is open.
And there are often youth turkey tags available a week before and a week after Thanksgiving. Does this occur? I mean, is that allowed up in Middle Mountain, or does it occur up in the Middle Mountain area?
Turkey hunting, yes.
Okay. Any other questions based on that?
Very briefly. I'd just like to show you exhibit number 23. Where does the road in Middle Mountain actually come to an end? Let me ask it like this. Are you familiar with an area called Tuckerville?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
That is the end of the road where there's another locked gate.
Okay. And I'm just going to show you another map here. On the top right corner of that map, we see, is that also Middle Mountain Road?
Yes, it is.
And does that show the full extent up to the Tuckerville area?
Yes.
And then the juror's question referred to turkey tags in the Thanksgiving time period. Is that something that occurs on Middle Mountain as well?
Yes.
Is that a popular hunt, or fewer people than elk and deer season?
I would say it's less popular than deer and elk.
Thank you. No further questions.
Anything?
Less popular than deer and elk, but there's still hunters up there looking for turkeys, right?
Correct.
And also, during that time period, particularly after Thanksgiving, folks can harvest Christmas trees up there as well, correct?
Yes, people can harvest Christmas trees until December 31st.
Nothing further.
Okay. Can this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Bogan?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you very much. You're free to go.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next witness.
Daniel Patterson.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Have a seat.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
I'm Dan Patterson.
And Mr. Patterson, as I understand it, you have some hearing issues, is that correct?
Yes, I've got my hearing aids turned up all the way, so I should be okay.
Okay. If you have any trouble understanding me, please just let me know.
Thanks.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm currently retired from everything. I worked for the sheriff's office from 1991 to 2015. I did some security work for Allied Universal from 2015 till last month. A couple of months ago, I retired completely.
Thank you. You said you worked
Hold on just a second. Okay.
You said you worked at the sheriff's office from 1991 till 2015?
Yes.
And when you were in the later stages of your career, what was your role within the sheriff's department?
I was an investigator for 14 years, sergeant.
During that time, did you have any involvement in the disappearance of Dylan Redwine?
Yes.
What was your role in the case?
It was initially assigned to me, missing child case.
And how did you first become involved in the case?
I was directed to see where the kid might be by my supervisor.
And you described it that it was a missing persons case, correct?
Yes.
What are the steps that law enforcement typically would take in the beginning of a missing person case?
I typically would check the residence. I've found children hiding inside the house before. I'd check neighbors. I would check friends to see if they might be with some friends, and maybe they can give a clue as to where he might have gone. Check to try to see what the dynamic was between the parents and the children to see if they might have wanted to leave. Also, what their interests were, if they may have gone for a hike or on fishing or whatever the case might be, and just kind of get a direction of where we might be able to find them. But let's start at the home, work my way out from there.
And did you in fact do that in this case?
Yes.
Did you, early on in a missing persons case, is there sometimes an effort to use their electronic devices or their phone to locate them?
Yes.
Can you describe how that works?
We can request information from the phone company, and actually we usually need to get a warrant for that, but they can ping the phone, triangulate from towers, and often pinpoint where the phone might be, which is one way. I mean, the obvious way would be to call the phone first. Sometimes they answer, and but we weren't able to get any signal from that phone from the day I was involved. Never did find it.
Never did find it, never did get a signal, is that what you said?
Yes.
Thank you. Early on in the case, did you meet with the family?
Not right at first. It's just when we couldn't find them right away, I did meet with the family. Mother and brother came out, and by that point, it turned into a more extensive search, and search and rescue personnel were involved, and we initially combed the area trying to find him, and went from there.
Early on in the case, especially those first 24 to 48 hours, did you ever instruct Mark Redwine that he should stay at his home in case Dylan Redwine were to call? Was he ordered to stay at home?
No, he did say he'd like to stay home in case someone would call with information. And, he wanted to be around so that, he wouldn't miss a phone call. It might even be Dylan. So I believe that's what he did.
Okay. Do you recall receiving Dylan Redwine's laptop into evidence in the case?
Yes.
And do you recall where that came from?
It's from Mark Redwine's residence. It was on the kind of the kitchen dining area.
You wrote a report about this case, correct?
Yes.
And if I were to show you, well, one moment, please. Let me ask it like this. Did you recall receiving any devices from Elaine Hall and Corey Redwine, Mark's other family from Colorado Springs?
I remember looking at Elaine's cell phone. She had texts on it from Dylan.
Okay. But it's your recollection that the laptop belonging to Dylan actually came from Mark's residence. Is that correct? Mark Redwine's residence?
Yes.
Okay. Was one of the parts of your investigation to conduct some neighborhood canvassing?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Initially, it was neighbors right around there, and it turned into a more extensive canvassing. It was just a grid search, and she's a crime analyst at the time. We did a grid pattern search of every single resident up there. Not everybody was home, but we did try to talk to everyone in the Wasito area.
Would it be fair to describe this canvassing effort as ongoing and coming out at different times during the case?
Yeah. We'd hear about someone that may come back from vacation, and we'd try to contact them, and we'd follow up on tips that we received. We were receiving a lot of tips, follow up on those, and anytime someone had an idea about where he might be, we'd try to follow through and see to its end.
And I want to get back to the tips in just a second, but I still want to stay on these early days of the investigation. Did search and rescue play an active role during that time?
Yes, they did. Right at the beginning, it might even been the next day after I was called out. They organized a team, and we were searching the hills in and around the residence, and also the community out there. Yeah, at one point they thought they might have spotted some person about the size of Dylan running on the hill up behind the house. I responded to that one with investigator Tom Cowling. Tracked her down. It was just a jogger that was out for a jog, but they never had any results from where he might be. Their efforts.
So someone saw a jogger, thought it might be Dylan, and you ran that down?
Yeah.
Okay. Did search and rescue, while they were there, did they conduct their own neighborhood canvassing as well?
Yes. And after about the second day, they decided it's probably just a runaway, and they went home.
Okay. Did the FBI become involved around that time?
I'm not sure. I can't remember when they got involved, but they did get involved on that. That would be my supervisor would have called them and enlisted their help.
Do you recall whether they also engaged in the neighborhood canvassing effort?
They were, and they also volunteered to follow up on tips and leads that might be helpful. So they from early on, they were assisting.
And then you also described that one of your coworkers, a crime analyst, I think you called her, Carrie Bonine?
Yes.
And you engaged in a more thorough canvassing effort later as well?
Yes.
And you described that as a grid pattern?
Yes.
What does that mean?
That means every residence on every road, back and forth. Obviously, you have to follow roads around, but we do a sweep. This one was from north end of the lake to the south end of the lake, and we followed every road to its end and knocked on every door.
And did this neighborhood canvassing effort, whether by search and rescue or the FBI or your own work, did that ever produce any evidence that helped you find Dylan Redwine?
No.
You talked a little bit about tips, and tell us how did the tips get received into law enforcement?
Initially, it was my phone they were calling, and my fellow investigators. We would leave cards, but it got to a point where we had to organize that a little better. There was too many calls coming in, and we set up a tip line, and we kept a log, and from that log, then we would decide who would go where and who would follow up on which tip. It was a dedicated line just for tips, and we would go through the logs every day and try to follow up on all of them.
Was there a strong community-based effort to try to find Dylan Redwine?
Yes, and a lot of those tips were the community trying to help, and a lot of volunteers in the community would offer to assist the searches. And so it seemed like they were pulling together. Everybody wanted to locate them, and it's kind of a small, tight community up there. And so we received a lot of cooperation from everybody.
When you say up there, do you mean the Vallecito area?
Vallecito area.
And roughly, and I understand it's been a long time, roughly how many houses are up there? How many full-time residents?
There's maybe 150 or so. It's hard to say. I never counted.
Okay, fair enough. So you said you followed up on these tips. Why?
Well, it doesn't, any tip could be legitimate. Someone may have given us a tip that they had a psychic feeling that he might be in the lake. And I don't know if that's a legitimate, thing or not. But this person might have actual information that he's in the lake and just wanted to play it off as a psychic reading. So you can't disregard anything. Wherever they tell you he might be at this location, they think he's at this location, we'd go in and we'd look. And so many of the tips to us, just on the face, it didn't seem like they were really relevant or might even lead to anything, but you can't disregard it because I don't know what the mindset is. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know where they got the tip. I don't know the reason they're giving the tip. So we just follow up on all of them, and that way we can cover our bases and don't miss something.
Were there a lot of psychic tips that came in?
There were a lot of psychic tips that came in.
There was a tip that came in from Moriarty, New Mexico. Do you recall that?
Yes.
What do you remember about that, and what steps you took to follow up on it?
Someone recognized or said they saw Dylan in Moriarty, and so we requested the video surveillance of the store they saw him in. The video was sent, and there was a boy his size, his hair color, his age, wearing the type of clothes that he wears. Had a hat and everything on, but you can't really, you know, surveillance video, you can't be sure.
What did you do with that video after you received it?
I showed it to Elaine and her family, and to her it looked like it could be him. She seemed so convinced. I was, you know, pretty hopeful that it was. So I requested that I go down and look, and I was given permission to do so, and I left right away, and I went and tracked down this boy.
When did you go? How soon after receiving the video and the positive identification from Elaine Hall did you drive down there?
As soon as we showed her, and I think it might have been the same day, I left that afternoon.
Okay.
And it may have been the same day.
And
So,
did you, in fact, go down to Moriarty?
I did.
What did you find when you arrived?
I located the store. I don't remember what kind of store it was, a dollar store or something like that. And talked to the manager and talked to people around there and showed them still photographs of the surveillance video. And it didn't take long for them to recognize that boy. And they told me, you know, from more than one person, they told me where he lives. And so I went there, and it was the boy wearing the same exact clothes as he did in the video. I took still photos of him on my phone and sent them back to the office so that they could show Elaine, and basically it wasn't him. It was just a random child that looked like him and wore the same clothes and walked like him, and it was just a coincidence.
And when you say it wasn't him, meaning it was not Dylan Redwine?
Dylan Redwine.
Okay. I want to shift topics a little bit. Was one of the things that you did during your investigation to acquire Mark Redwine's bank records?
Yes.
And did you get those directly from the bank itself?
I did.
And do you recall the owners on that bank account, meaning like what names were on the bank account?
Mark
Hearsay Foundation.
Mr. Champagne?
I'm asking him if he recalls it.
Okay, well, I'll let him answer that question, but the next one is probably hearsay, isn't it?
That's fine, Judge. Do you recall the owners on that bank account without saying their names?
Yes.
Okay. And did you put those bank records into evidence?
Yes.
Okay. And we're going to have another witness talk about those later, Your Honor. So no further questions on that topic. Did you engage in searches in the fall and winter of the fall of 2012 through the winter and into 2013?
Yes.
Do you recall which areas were focused on first by law enforcement?
Middle Mountain was an area we're looking at.
And Vallecito Lake, did you focus on Vallecito Lake?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall other searches around that area? And if you do, could you describe those for the jury?
I was personally up in a helicopter several times, doing flyovers, and enlisted the help of boats with sonars on the lake, and revisited homes that we'd already, you know, checked that were vacant. And so, yeah, that kind of stuff. I went with any search teams that were organized to go up on Middle Mountain, including the one when we discovered his bones.
Okay. Let's go back to the fall and early winter of 2012. Do you recall a roadway search throughout the region?
Yeah, search and rescue, as well as other volunteers, fire department and other volunteers would we'd be walking along the roadways. We did that along Lemon Lake and did that more than once on the Middle Mountain Road, and just looking for anything that may have been discarded that might belong to Dylan, like the phone or any of his property or the backpack that we never found. So it was that kind of roadway search that we did.
And were these search efforts ongoing throughout the winter?
Yes, and I personally would keep searching even if it wasn't with an organized group. I would go up and look at places that I might have been able to find discarded stuff. And it's just part of the whole thing, just trying to cover all the bases. And I don't necessarily, I don't mean to say anything bad about people, but I don't trust other people's search and how well they do it. So a lot of times I would just recanvass on my own, hoping that I could see something that was missed the first time.
So you checked and double checked, checked again. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Did you ever find any evidence relating to Dylan Redwine?
And not until the day we found his shoe.
And we're going to go there in just a second. I want to ask you about the searching on Middle Mountain and how the snow over the winter may have impacted that.
It did, and I would go up occasionally to see how much of the snow had melted, so that we can try to pick a date where a group effort. I mean, the volunteers were over 70, and I wanted the road to be clear so that we could go up as far as we could and just start working our way back down the mountain. So I would check to see where the level was. I went up on one occasion, the gate was still closed, and that's what I was waiting for that gate to open up so that we can get a cruise up there and start searching.
You said you went up there and the gate was still closed. Do you remember roughly when that was?
I don't remember.
And that's fine. If I approached with one of the supplemental reports that you wrote, do you think it would refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Page 461, Counsel.
What's the number of the supplemental?
369.
Thank you.
Let me approach that. You may. Take a look at the top 3 paragraphs here. Read those to yourself and let me know when you're finished.
Okay.
Thank you. My approach to retrieve that. You may. You said you went up and checked Middle Mountain Road to see if the gate was still open. Do you remember, after looking at this now, when that was and why you did that?
April 23rd is where I believe it was on there, 2013. I went up to check the gate. Also, received a tip that someone saw Mark's truck driving up on that day. And I wanted to see if the gate was open, and I wanted to see if I could discern his tire tracks, where he may have gone or what he was doing up there. The gate was closed, and there was a lot of tire tracks around, including ATV tracks that covered up the vehicle track, regular vehicle tracks. So I couldn't really gather any information from that. But the gate was still locked. I walked around it and went up the road a little ways, and I saw that the snow was maybe a couple 100 yards up. And it was melted off the road. After that, it was pretty snowed in.
Okay. So you were actually able to walk around the gate and?
Yeah.
If I showed you a map of that particular search on April 23rd, 2013, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Exhibit number 499, for the record, if I may approach.
Yes.
You recognize that, sir?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate description of the search you conducted on April 23rd, 2013?
Yes.
Move to admit. Mr. Bogan?
No objection.
Submitted. Move to publish.
Yes.
And sir, I had the map up on the screen behind you here. There's a blue line on that map. What does that represent?
That looks like the road on Middle Mountain going up there.
As you drove that road, did
Yeah.
you obviously you went to see if the gate was open, that's what you said.
Yes.
Were you also visually scanning the roadway area?
I always do.
Okay. Did you see anything of evidence in this case?
No.
Do you recall directing a search of the pond area next to Vallecito Dam Power Plant?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
There's a pond directly below the dam that, just adjacent to the spillway, that general public doesn't have access to, but you can get in there. They engineered the gates so that you can walk around, or the fences, so that the wildlife can't, but people can, except for small animals. But there's a pond that has nothing can escape from that pond, and I wanted to see if I could find anything in there, and I went up there and dragged the pond with a grappling hook, and then I made arrangements for a dive team to go into that pond and see what they could see, just in case there was something there of use, but we didn't find anything.
You didn't find anything in the pond?
Other than big trout, and that was about it.
Okay. Nothing related to this case, though?
No.
Did you continue to search the Middle Mountain area in the spring of 2013?
Yes.
You recall conducting a search on Middle Mountain Road on May 22nd, 2013?
Yes.
Can you describe that for us?
That search, I believe, was also with search and rescue personnel. And everybody had an assignment, and everybody was searching. And
You recall driving up high and then walking back down during this search?
yes, I drove up to where, as far as snow was melted. It was pretty high. I'd walk down the side of the road on my own, pretty much, looking on both sides for the day I spent up there.
I showed you a map of that search. Would you recognize it?
Yeah.
People's 501. I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes.
Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate description of the search you conducted on that, I believe, was May 22nd, 2013?
Yes.
Move to admit.
Mr. Bogan?
No objection.
Admitted.
Did you find anything relevant to this case during that search?
No.
Do you recall conducting a search of the Waterfall area the next day?
Yes.
What is the Waterfall area?
Right next to the road, not far below the gate.
What I'd like to do is publish number 501, show that to the jury. There, again, we have the blue line on the map, and the blue line ends near the, sort of near the top of Middle Mountain Road there. Is that a fair and accurate description of the area that you searched with your walk for that day?
Yes.
Okay. And we were discussing the Waterfall area. Can you just give us a verbal description of what the Waterfall area looked like?
It was just a section of the road that had no trees on it, and it was below the gravel pit, and it just looked like a straight drop off, but there was a culvert under the road, and from that culvert was the waterfall, and it dropped down into quite a ways, but you could see the bottom if you peered over the side from the road. And there was a lot of stuff down there that people had been dumping. So I went down there and was looking around.
What did you find down there at the bottom of the Waterfall area?
Microwaves and bags full of animal parts like bear paws and trash and stuff like that.
Okay. Did you find any evidence relating to this case?
No.
If I showed you a map of that area, would you recognize it?
Yes.
502?
Yes.
Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
And is it a fair and accurate description of the Waterfall search you conducted on May 23rd, 2013?
Yes.
Move to admit.
Mr. Bogan?
No objection.
Move to publish.
Yes, it's admitted. You may publish.
Thank you. I've got the Waterfall area there on the large screen. Could you describe for the jurors what you saw there and what it looked like? That's a poor question. Strike that. Was it a large area that you were searching?
It was an area probably at least as big as this square footage of this building, and steep embankments on both sides. The water continued down, but that area I concentrated on because that's where I found a pile of trash. Everybody is treating it like a landfill.
Okay. And again, you never found anything of interest in that area, did you?
No.
I'd like to turn your attention now to June of 2013. Did you help plan and later participate in a large-scale search of Middle Mountain at that time?
Yes.
And tell us about that. How did that come to pass?
Arrangements had been made months prior to do that, and we formulate some kind of plan, and search and rescue organized, had volunteers from the fire department and law enforcement, other agencies, and they organized people in groups, and those groups would take certain sections of road where you could actually look and walk the area, and they would do their own systematic search of that area. Different groups were dropped off at different parts of the road, and everybody more or less started close to about the same time and walking downhill once they
I want to refer your attention back to Exhibit 501. This was the search you had conducted in Middle Mountain. is this roughly the area of Middle Mountain that you were searching with this larger group in June?
Yes.
And how did it differ from your search that you conducted in May, on May 22nd of that year?
Well, the number of people involved.
And did you, when you did this search in May, were you mainly on the roadway itself?
I was on the roadway, and I would also 100 yards at either side of the roadway, or 50 yards, depends on the terrain. Some places there wasn't really anywhere to go, depending on how steep it was, or for instance, the Waterfall, you'd have to go down in there, but basically staying in the roadway, and as far as someone could toss something.
And then when you went back with this larger scale search, was it the intention to spread out off the roadway a little farther?
Yes, considerably farther, as far as they could. They would string people on the line, and they would search wherever they could walk, pretty much.
You say string people on the line. What does that mean?
Well, they would line people up side by side, straight out from the road, and walk downhill and kind of fan the whole area, and more eyes and further out, and a lot more ground can be covered that way, and a lot more people might be able to find something. So that's the intent, and the people in charge of those particular searches may have did grid searches or circular searches, or any number of patterns to search, just depending on the terrain and how they could do it.
And did this search produce evidence related to the disappearance of Dylan Redwine?
That search did.
What was the first item that you recall being recovered?
Received a radio transmission that someone found a shoe, and they weren't sure if it had anything to do with the case. So I went to go look at it, and
did you photograph it?
Yeah, I did.
If I showed you those photographs, would you recognize them?
Yes.
I'd like to approach with people's 306, 307, 308, 309, and 310. You may. Just take a moment to look these over and let me know when you're finished.
Yeah.
Do you recognize these exhibits?
Yes.
Are they fair and accurate representations of the shoe that was found on Middle Mountain?
Yes.
Move to admit.
Mr. Bogan?
No objection.
They're admitted.
When you took these photographs of the shoe, what did you do with those photographs?
I entered them into evidence, and did the same thing with the shoe.
And if I showed you the shoe itself, would you recognize it?
Yes.
I'm approaching with what's previously been admitted as 311, I believe. Yes.
Okay.
And what is that, sir?
That's the shoe.
Okay. What did you do with the shoe?
I photographed it, bagged it, and later it was logged into evidence.
Were either of these items used or presented to Dylan Redwine's family?
Could you repeat that?
Was this item presented for identification to Dylan Redwine's family?
Yes.
And how did that occur?
It was, well, she was with a team, I believe, at gravel pit, and radio communication with her that we had a shoe that we wanted her to look at because it might be his. and it was taken to wherever she was at. And then I received transmission later that she identified it as his shoe.
Thank you. If I may approach you. Yes. I want to go back to the photographs for a second, if I may publish, starting with 306. Is this what the shoe looked like when it was first found?
Yes.
And let's move down the line and then to 307, 308. At this point, had you moved the shoe to better photograph it?
Yes.
And was this, let's go back to 306, please. How would you describe the terrain where the shoe was found?
Well, you could see some of it, but it was fairly steep and rugged, a lot of slash, and in fact, it's steeper than that picture even indicates.
Okay. And if we could just kind of walk through the pictures, 309, I think, is where we were at next. Another photograph of the shoe out there in the field where it was found.
Yes.
And then 310. And this is a picture of a shoe, obviously, in a different location, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Nearby to the shoe, was there any other items of evidence found that day?
Yes.
Do you recall what that was?
There was, I believe that day, some of this, like a shred of underwear and earbuds and scraps of clothes were found at the site that looked like it was a dump site for the body.
Okay, and we're going to visit those in just a second. I'll be more direct. Do you recall a sock being found near to the shoe?
Yes, it wasn't far away.
And if I showed you photographs of that, would you recognize them?
Yes.
312 and 313. If I may approach, Your Honor? You may. I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibits 312 and 313. Please tell me if you recognize.
Yes.
Are they fair and accurate representations of the sock?
Yes.
Move to admit. Any objection?
Not on that record.
312 and 313 are admitted.
All right, let's start with exhibit number 312. What do we see here, sir?
That's the sock.
Is this the picture of where it was actually found?
Yes.
Okay. And to your knowledge, had it been moved or shifted before this photograph was taken?
It hadn't been moved at that time.
Had not? Is that what you said?
Yes, it was. That's what, the first photograph, I believe.
Okay, and then the next picture, 313? Another photograph, obviously it's been moved to a new location.
Yes.
If I showed you the sock itself, would you recognize it?
Yes.
I'm approaching with what I believe has already been admitted as 314. Go ahead. Is that the same sock that was found in the field that day?
Yes.
How did the discovery of Dylan's shoe and sock impact the rest of the search going forward?
Once Elaine Redwine identified it as his, everyone concentrated on that and around where that was found. We did a more extensive search, crisscross pattern, trying to find anything that might be of help. So lots of searchers, arm's length away, and we covered and recovered that whole area.
Do you recall finding a bone in that same general region?
Yes, there was. They enlisted the help of a dog team, cadaver dog. And, the handler of the dog noticed that he alerted on one of the bones. There was a lot of bones, even of animals everywhere. But, the dog alerted on this particular bone, and, that's what that dog does. So I went down there and photographed it and collected it and entered it for testing, and it went into evidence. Also, sent photos to a archaeologist, and she's a professor at the college, to see if it looked like it might be a human bone, and she thought that...
Objection, this is hearsay. He's about to say what the doctor said.
Mr. Champagne?
That's fine, I'll stop you there. If I showed you photographs of that bone, would you recognize them?
Yes.
Right. I've got exhibits 324, 325, and 326. I may approach.
You may.
You recognize those, sir?
Yes.
And what are they?
These all three are pictures of the same bone that the dog alerted on.
And are they fair and accurate representations of what it looked like that day?
Yes.
Move to admit.
Mr. Bogan?
No objection.
They're admitted.
Before I publish, I want to ask you, when you collect a bone such as this or other pieces of evidence out there in the field, what kind of precautions were you taking to collect them carefully?
I have latex gloves I'd put on before I moved anything into a bag, so there wouldn't be any contamination, DNA contamination, and would seal the bag on the spot. And
when you say seal the bag, what kind of bag are you referring to?
it depends on what the item was. Sometimes in a paper bag, if it was big, we'd use whatever we had. I ran out of paper bags at this point, and I was moved on to some larger trash bags, black plastic.
And why did you put it into a bag?
Prevent any contamination. We don't want anything touching it.
And let's go ahead and publish exhibit number 324 for the jury. Can you describe what we're seeing here, sir?
That's the bag I put the bone in.
So for this particular bone, you had actually moved it prior to this photograph being taken?
Yes.
And 325? What do we see here?
That's another photo of it.
That's the same bone, though?
Yes.
And 326, please. Same bone?
Yes.
Okay, and that's scale for measurement?
Right.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Was there another bone found in that general area as well?
Yes, just downhill from that one, there's a bigger bone, probably a tibia, and it was also photographed and bagged.
And if I showed you photographs of that bone, would you recognize them?
Yes.
Exhibits 302, 303, and 304, please. If I may approach, Your Honor.
You may.
Start that sequence again.
Sure. Exhibits 302, 303, and 304. You recognize those, sir?
Yes.
And what are they?
That's the bone that we found directly below, not far from the other bone. It was downhill.
Okay. Are they fair and accurate representations of the bone as you saw it that day?
Yes.
Move to admit.
Mr. Bogan?
No objection.
302, 303, and 304 omitted.
Thank you. Move to publish, please.
Yes.
Let's start with 302. What do we see here, sir?
That's the second bone we found.
Okay. Does this represent the condition you found it in when it was first discovered?
Yes,
And so this one looks like it was at least partially sort of hidden beneath the leaves and other things out there. Is that right?
yes,
Okay. 303. Is this another picture of that same bone?
yes,
And 304. A third picture of that same bone?
yes,
You described, thank you, these bones, and without getting into what anybody else said, these bones, photographs of these bones were presented to a local professor at the college, you said?
yes,
And were these bones later sent off for testing for DNA?
yes,
Now, there were other items that were found in that same general area that were not bones. Is that correct?
yes,
And you described some of those things earlier, like a T-shirt, scraps, and earbuds. Is that right?
yes.
Tell us about how that came to pass.
It was a search that I was leading with, I don't remember how many volunteers, at least maybe a dozen or more. We were just going to start at a grid search, not far from each other, and go one direction, then go the other direction. And during that search, someone at the upper end of the line radioed that they found what looked like pieces of clothing. And so I went up there to take a look.
And do you recall what was found?
There were some black earbuds. Looked like they were, I don't know if they were chewed off at one end, or if it was cut, can't tell. And there was a piece of underwear and pieces of shirt, and ultimately there was a piece of a bone that was identified as a clavicle bone in that same spot.
And there are other witnesses that are going to discuss those items you've just described, but I want to focus in on the clavicle itself.
Okay.
If I showed you photographs of that clavicle, would you recognize it?
Yes.
298, 299. And
I'm not going to object to the exhibits. I am going to object to the identification of these remains as specific bones unless the proper foundation has been laid. I think it's a medical opinion.
that's fine, Judge.
All right.
These bones in pictures 298 and 299, would you recognize them if I showed them to you?
Yes.
298, 299.
And that was the bone that was discovered at that dump site.
Okay. And I think I misspoke. I said bones. Those are two photographs, but it's the same bone. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is that a fair and accurate representation of the bone you found that day?
Yes.
Move to admit 298 and 299.
They're already in.
Oh, thank you, Judge. Move to publish.
Yes.
This one's a little harder to see. Can you come down from the podium and point out to the jurors where the bone is in that picture?
Yes.
Thank you. You can have a seat again. And 299, please. Is this more of a close-up on that same bone?
Yes.
Was that bone collected in a similar fashion to the other ones you've described?
Yes.
Placed into evidence?
Yes.
Thank you. You did describe, and I do want to touch base about the earbuds. You said that there were some earbuds found as well?
Yes.
Okay. And if I showed you photographs of that, would you recognize it?
Yes.
I'd like to approach with People's Exhibits 317, 318, and 319, if I may.
You may.
Thank you. Please take a look at those and tell me if you recognize them.
Yes, those look like the photos I took of the earbuds.
Okay. Are they fair and accurate descriptions of the item that as you saw it that day?
Yes.
Move to admit?
Mr. Bogan?
No objection.
317, 18, and 19 are admitted.
Okay, let's go to publish Exhibit 317, please. So, Mr. Patterson, this may be a challenge, I imagine it is for anybody looking at this photograph. Can you please point out where the earbuds are in that photograph with the pointer?
Yes.
And you're moving the pointer, does that represent the wires of the earbud, is that correct?
Wires run along here. Brand name.
Is this how it appeared on the day that those earbuds were found? Let's go to 318, please. And Mr. Patterson, there's actually a microphone right there. If you could use that microphone to your right of the television. Again, point out the earbuds for us and describe it. That's great. And let's go to 319, please. This is more of a close-up photograph? Okay, thanks. You can have a seat again.
Leave it on.
If I showed you the actual earbuds, would you recognize them?
Yes.
I'm approaching with what's been marked as, and previously admitted as Exhibit 321. You recognize those, sir?
Yes.
Are they the earbuds that you found in the field that day?
Yes.
And finally, the underwear band. If I showed you a photograph of that, would you recognize it?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
This is exhibit number 315. You recognize that item, sir?
Yes.
And what is it?
It's the elastic part of some underwear.
Is that what you found in the field that day?
Yes.
Is it in a different location?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate representation of what it looked like?
Yes.
Move to admit?
Mr. Bogan?
No objection.
It's admitted.
Thank you, sir. And move to publish number 315. Is this the underwear band that you found in the field that day?
Yes.
And we see some organic material attached to it. What is that?
Those are elastic strands from that underwear band that entwined in the forest duff.
Okay. And if I showed you the actual item, would you recognize it?
Yes.
like to approach with what's previously admitted as 316.
Go ahead.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Now, you weren't the person that actually collected many of the items we've just discussed, the earbuds, or found them, I should say. You collected but didn't find them, is that right?
Correct.
And when someone else would find an item that you thought might be of interest, how did it come to be collected?
An investigator would put on his gloves and collect it and bag it, and later it was entered in evidence at the office.
And the person who found it, did they receive any instructions about not touching the item or leaving it where it lay, that kind of thing?
Yes, everybody received instructions on the search team that if an item was found, there to leave it. An investigator would come and inspect it and make a determination on whether it should be collected or not.
Okay. The general area where these items were found, did you end up drawing a hand-drawn map to describe the locations of the various items?
Yes.
And if I showed you that map, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Exhibit number 330 for the record. I may approach, Your Honor.
Okay.
Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
And what is it?
That's a map of the area where we found the remains and the dump site, and did the best I could to show how steep it was, but not much of an artist. That's what I drew.
Okay. You're the author of that map?
Yes.
And is it a fair and accurate description of the locations where those items were found?
Yes.
Move to admit.
No objection.
330 is admitted.
Move to publish.
Yes.
I think if it's okay, I'd like to approach, Your Honor.
Yes, that's fine. Here. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Patterson, I'm pointing here to a large curved section at the top of the map. What does that describe for us?
That's the road that swings around. That's the road that swings around towards the gravel pit.
And we see a secondary road coming off the apex of that first road. What does that describe?
That's a sheep trail road or an UTV road that proceeds down.
And here we see an area where there looks like to be some log or something to that effect. What is that?
Two fallen trees, two trees that fell and left a kind of a V pattern, but right in between those trees is where the stuff, everything is found.
And you wrote here, body dump site.
That was the assumption at that time, that we were making a body dump site.
And you said everything was found there. When you say everything, what do you mean?
I mean the earbuds, the underwear band, the clavicle. That's what I mean by it. It was, in my opinion, the dump site.
And as we describe the other bones, just refer to them as bones, if that's okay. Here we see an item, you wrote in there, big rock. Why did you add that in?
It was kind of a marker. It was a fairly large boulder that was in the middle of the area that we were searching. That, and you can see where I marked the shoe and where the sock was found.
And the shoe and the sock are both very close to the big rock, is that correct?
Yes.
And down here, we see some words that are written out. What do those describe?
The tibula, is where we found the one bone, and the fibula is where the other bone was found.
How would you describe this entire sort of general area?
It's very steep, wooded, heavy brush or duff, and it's probably a 12–14% grade. So is there
Objection, foundation, not a topographer. He talks about the percent of the grade.
I think he can make an estimate just, living in this area, that's fine.
Did you have the chance to review a map created by investigator Heidel describing that same area?
Yes.
Was that map fair and accurate to what you recall the locations of those items to be?
Yes.
At any time during this search of this particular area, did you find Dylan Redwine's hat?
I don't recall a hat.
Did you find his backpack?
No.
Did you find his wallet?
No.
Did you find his iPod?
No.
Did you find his iPhone?
No.
I don't have any further questions for this witness.
All right, this is probably a good place to take our lunch break. We'll start up again at 1:15. Everybody, remember that you're not allowed to talk about the case with each other. Don't talk about it with anybody else. Don't do any research or read about the case. So everybody rise to the jury, please. All right, we'll be in recess.